I started out this project with the plain wooden box. It was quite nicely constructed. First step is to remove the hardware, and I'm kind of marking it with a pencil where it goes, just so I don't put very dimensional elements in those spots. It needed a little bit of sanding. It wasn't quite finished. I'm not going out of the way. Most of it is going to be covered in acrylic paint, so it doesn't have to be super smooth. My main idea was to use this leftover handmade lace. I used most of it previously on a much larger project, and I had these scraps, and it kind of looks like a rough net, and I definitely wanted to use the pieces I had left in a way that's still honoring the original handiwork. So what I'm doing is gluing it down with some gel matte medium and going back to saturate the fibers. After it dried overnight, I made sure to trim off any bits hanging over, and I'm going to lay down my first layer of paint as a primer and a base. I'm using a nice dark chocolate brown. And I'm just gonna paint the inside and the outside of the box everywhere, making sure to get in all the crevices so that when the piece is finished and anything peeks through, is just gonna be dark brown in the recesses and shadows. I had a little bit of miscalculation with the lace. I had to cut a little bit of it off because I didn't leave quite enough space for the hardware. But no matter, I decided to fix it by adding even more texture. And this time I'm going to use some fine granite. I'm using the same gel medium and basically sprinkling it on and dusting off the excess. And I'm going to add it in other strategical places, just whatever felt nice to me at the time. After that drying, I am sealing in all the little granite pieces because this was shed over time. If not, I'm using some shellac ink to seal it in. It has a yellow tint, but this time I don't mind. I just make sure to completely saturate it and let it dry for a long time. I'm showing you another little mistake I made, very similar to the one before. I just put some of that sandy stuff right in the way of the hinge again. Next, I'm going to use a nice deep blue, and I'm going to paint most of the outside of the box, basically all of the parts that only show the netting and the bottom. I'm going to leave the inside brown. And while that's drying, I'm going to turn my attention to the decorations that I'm going to add to the outside of the box. First off, I'm making a little bottle with a scroll, possibly with instructions to the location of the treasure. I'm just aging and disheveling this little piece of paper that has printed handwriting on it, and I'm also aging it a little bit with brown ink and rolling it up to be a little tiny scroll. I'm also adding some fine sand to the inside of the bottle and kind of filling it up halfway so that the little scroll is half buried. Put the cork in and seal it. Moving on to the next element, I have this plastic starfish. I think it's like a toy. I'm not sure where I found it. But it has a really good mold, just an awful color. So I'm just gonna repaint it. I based it in the same chocolate brown and then adding a much lighter brown, overbrushing the whole thing. After that coat, I decided to add some bright yellow, but that made it a little bit too light for my taste. So I'm going back with some dark brown to bring out more of those textures. And finally, I'm adding some gold paint to it to give it some shimmer and shine. The other elements I want to add to the top of the box are actual seashells, and honestly I picked out some of the most unremarkable ones I had because I knew I was going to paint them. So I'm just base coating most of them in the same blue and some of them in brown to make them ready for the proper paint job. I'm gonna use much better quality acrylic paints and I'm painting them in greenish, bluish tones, basically wet mixing right on the object. And seeing how beautiful that bright blue was, I'm adding kind of like a sloppy dry brushing of it all over the box as well, but I think it made it look quite nice. Finally adding more of that gold paint for the same shimmer and shine. I just like the way things look with a little bit of metallic paint on them. And also adding a little bit to the body of the box. At this stage, I would consider the box properly painted, so it's time to reassemble it. So I'm carefully adding back on the original hardware that came with the box. It's a little bit finicky as a lot of the paint has obscured the original holes, but eventually I manage. And there we have a nice box. Actually, this probably would be a lot more practical than a really heavily decorated one, but I had an idea for a very interesting cluster on top. And I'm using some little scrolls I made before, a tiny book, the painted seashells from before, lots of seaglass, a tiny key, a vintage brass button from my collection of randoms, and a tiny skull. And at this stage you're watching me decide where goes what. And I'm affixing everything with hot glue, trying to put everything back in its place, but also making tiny improvements on the original thoughts as I go. Of course, I couldn't let the sides be too empty, so I'm adding a tiny treasure map, some cards, a wax seal, and of course a skull and crossbone to the sides and the front, just to have a little bit more visual interest everywhere. It's a final touch to fill in all the unsightly little gaps and to hide any hot glue overspillage. I'm adding some lichen. This is often called reindeer moss, but it is actually a particular species of preserved lichen. It's just very fluffy and beautiful to me. And there we have it, the box after it's been fully decorated. I'm very happy with the clusters I created. I think it evokes the right feeling that I was going for. And I really like the varying textures. It's a very touchable little art project. And of course it has utility in the sense that you can keep your trinkets inside. I'll let you enjoy some glamour shots. Do let me know what you think about this project in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more of this, do consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you for watching. I hope you're having a nice day. Bye.